Hey guys, before we get started, let me throw some quick shout outs. We got the San Diego PD legend, man, from Team 4, Chris Kilby. Remember Chris, Carlos?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, man. San Diego PD legend. We got big VJ Juarez watching us all the way from Long Beach. And we got our sister from Riverside. Ceci, I know you're always there. Buenas tardes a todos. Thank you for being on. We got Roger Demshock. That's another legend from the Sheriff's Department. Good evening, everyone. Dave, have everybody pat down Carlos to make sure he doesn't have a pencil on him. You know why the pencil, Carlos? You remember the pencil? We'll talk about that later. A good one, Roger. A good one. Christine, hey, welcome. Greetings from San Diego. Thank you, Christine. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. We got Sergio Martinez desde San Jose, California. We got Eddie Cruz. Hey, David, saludos. Thank you for what you all do. Much love from San Diego. Otay, God bless. God bless. And we're going to talk about your dad today, Eddie. And it's going to be a great show. With that said, guys, I am excited about today's show. It's going to be outstanding. We've been wanting to do this show for several years now, but due to unknown reasons, we've just got tied up doing other things. But God has his perfect timing. And today the timing is perfect. But with that said, one last shout out, Anthony, saludos from Seattle, Washington. Welcome, Anthony. With that said, guys, let's go around. Carlos, we're going to introduce you right now, the legend from San Diego PD. But before, let's do what we always do. What are we smoking and what are we drinking? We'll start off with you, Bobby. What are you smoking? What are you drinking, brother? We'll go around. Here we go.
I'm drinking or smoking a 601 La Bomba from Espinosa Cigars. It's the nuclear one. It's a full-body smoke right there. There it is. And I'm not drinking alcohol today. I'm having some coffee. I got a late start, so I'm having my go-to Bustelo. I like strong, dark coffee, so that's what I'm drinking. Saludos.
And you know what? Sometimes when you're drinking a dark, strong cigar, there's nothing better than to have it with a good coffee instead of liquor. You know what I mean? Yep. So I know exactly where you're coming from on that one, brother, especially that dark cigar.
Nice. A dark, strong cigar with a black coffee. Nothing better than that.
Exactly. Doesn't get better than, we used to call it the joint un chanate. And you know what? It doesn't get better than that. Big Doug, what are you drinking today, brother?
Well, after last week's talking with Sarah about Japanese whiskeys, I remember I got a bottle as a gift from a friend of mine, and so I was looking at it, and it says it's 100% Japanese blended whiskey, so it's not the Scotch that they bring over, but it's called Kagan. I think it's pronounced Kagan. But I took a sip of it earlier, and I hadn't opened it yet, and it's really nice. I think I might have to explore some of these Japanese whiskeys in the future.
Yeah, please tell me how good it is, because you know what, they sell them at our Costco's, and take a picture of it, send me whenever you get a chance. Yeah. Maybe I could find it if it's good. You're the guinea pig, brother, if it's good. And with that said, Carlos, I know you're drinking something today, brother. What are you drinking, and from where?
I'm drinking some nice Chardonnay from Paso Robles. That's up in Northern California.
Okay.
I don't smoke, so this is all that I do.
And Carlos, you've never smoked cigars, cigarettes, or nothing, but you've drank when you were younger, and you always carried a pack of Camels, but not for you, for the CIs.
Exactly. There's nothing better than that. There's nothing better than a guy addicted to nicotine when you're interviewing him.
Exactly. And Conaway, welcome to the show, brother. Big Joe, all the way from Salinas. Welcome to the show, brother. It's going to be a great show. Guys, what I'm drinking today, I made myself an old-fashioned, but with my favorite Basil Hayden rye. I'll tell you, Basil Hayden rye, when you create your old-fashioned, it's probably one of the best drinks. With that said, guys, salud to a wonderful show today. Salud. Salud, Carlos. Bienvenido. Salud. Well, guys, let's get started. But before we do, we have San Diego PD legendary gunslinger. When you retired, Carlos, the San Diego Union Tribune did a whole story on you. When did you retire? In 2009?
In 09, yeah.
In 09. I remember it was front page. They had your picture. As a matter of fact, right now in the video, they showed you. They had your picture, and it said one of the last legendary gunslingers is retiring. And anybody that knows you knows that you were that guy. They didn't make that up. And you know what? They didn't give you enough justice. A lot of people know you because you work the hills, you work gangs. But I know you as a friend. I got recruited by you. You were my mentor when I first came on the department. You're the one that recruited me to come on the department, got me in the prison gang task force. I mean, you did a lot for me coming on. But one of the things that you specialize, you were involved in a lot of shootings. You were involved up in the hills undercover. You worked, but the Mexican Mafia, that was your expertise. Everybody throughout the state of California, Arizona, right now, Bobby's going to talk about it. Dude, everybody knew you as that expert of the Mexican Mafia. You're the one that put away Ronnie Hector Ayala for that triple homicide. You're the one that put thew away. You put all the old guys away, and when you retired, they came back. And now we had Chris Kilby, we had Mike Gutierrez, Steve Contreras, Van Cruz put them away. But you initially put all these guys away. But with that said, Bobby, tell us what you were talking about before about Carlos Chacon.
When I was a young officer, it was probably mid-80s. Before I got to narcotics, I was a uniform back in the day with Phoenix PD. If you wanted to go anywhere, you had to volunteer to go to the walking beat in the city housing projects. That's where you prove that you could go anywhere else, gangs, narcotics, SWAT. So in order to go anywhere, as a young cop, you volunteered to go to the walking beat, and it was a two-man team, and it was just hunting. Yeah, a lot of drugs. It was during the crack cocaine explosion. Well, all of us as a squad, the Lines in Shadow book, all the Joseph Wambach books started coming out. And I remember reading Lines in Shadows, and I couldn't put it down. I remember thinking, me and a couple of the other Spanish speakers are like, damn, I wish I was a cop in San Diego over there at that time. That would be something to work right there. So it's an honor to finally meet you, David. George, I've always talked about you, so it's an honor. Bienvenido.
Thank you.
And you know what, Bobby? He's going to come back. He doesn't know yet, but I know he's going to come back to talk about the experience of the book, Lines and Shadows. Right. And we're going to send him a really good bottle of Chardonnay. He's going to get a case from us, and he's definitely coming back to talk about that book. But Carlos, with that said, brother, go ahead, Bobby. Do you have something you want to say?
One last thing. As a young Spanish-speaking cop that wanted to work undercover, wanted to go do investigations, narcotics, gangs, that book, and then, of course, the Kiki Camarena case, were probably something very influential in me saying, I want to get to narcotics, undercover narcotics, and I want to do gangs. And later on, I was in the Mexican Mafia task force in Phoenix for about 5 years, and that's when I met David, to Paco Marcel, who was another legend from Arizona DPS. So I was on the Mexican Mafia task force. Yes.
Yeah. You remember Paco, Carlos?
I do.
Yeah, he's alive, and he just wrote a book. It's going to be coming out. What's the name of the book, Bobby? Was it something like Profile of a Criminal Mind or something?
Something like that. Yeah, he was the godfather of all the Mexican Mafia investigators here in Phoenix. And he was Arizona DPS. I was Phoenix PD. And he was a guy that my generation really looked up to.
He was a good guy.
And Carlos, I had not dinner, but we had a couple of drinks with him about 3 weeks ago, Bobby. Was it 3 weeks ago? Yeah. That we went to his home? Yeah. Actually, we drank water, but we went to his home, but we were there for about 2 hours. And, dude, he remembers you very well. As a matter of fact, he goes, next time you see Carlos, give him a big hug. He has fond memories of you. He was part of our prison gang task force back then.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
He said it's his best. Well, Carlos, listen, we got a great show. We're going to talk about a murder that occurred back in 1981. And you were working in our San Diego Police Department criminal intelligence. You had informants everywhere. But not only had informants, but you knew this guy, Mauro Gonzales. You grew up in the Barrio with him. With that said, take us on a journey on his life, and we're going to break it down what exactly happened back in October 19th of 1981. It's all yours. Let's talk about Otay.
Okay, just for clarification, David and I grew up in the Barrio Otay, which is in not too far from San Isidro by the border there. And it was, at the time, it was known as probably the most violent neighborhood, more than Logan, more than Oceanside, more than anybody. in San Diego County. The sheriffs had what was referred to as an 1199 once a week, and everybody would go there. But it was a really violent neighborhood. We grew up there right in the middle of it. David, I did, and my house was like the hangout house for all the mothers of the gangsters. You know, my mom in the morning would make a huge pot of coffee, and they would bring over their Mexican bread, their conchas, and they'd sit there all morning. They'd gossip and just talk about the things that women talked about. And the guys used to come over all the time. My younger brothers too used to run with the youngsters from Otay. I never ran with them, but they all knew me because of my brothers. So I mean, it was like a big family. And
hey, Carlos, where you lived, they used to call them the chango trees.
Yeah, there's a place.
The
There's always that neighborhood hangout for the gangsters. And right behind my house, in the alley, there were these huge eucalyptus trees, and they were called the chango trees, the monkey trees.
Yeah.
And all the guys would go there and they'd drink. And in fact, there's some of the family members of the gangsters that went there became pretty famous. They became actors. And you know what I'm talking about, David?
Yeah, Lopez. What's his name? Mario Lopez.
Mario Lopez.
Yeah, his brother, his tios, they were from Otay too. Octavo and all those guys. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And so I was friends with all of them, and then they never gave me a hard time. I never gave them a hard time. And then when we all grew up, I went into the law enforcement, and they either went, the people that we knew either went to prison, and they wound up joining the MA, or some of them wound up joining the NF. But they would get in trouble, and they would look me up. And then once it got out that I could be trusted, that I would not give them up. I mean, it was pouring sources, and I get calls from the prisons. I get calls from county jail. You know, I've got this going over here. I just heard these guys talking about this murder. Come see me. You know, but I always have to protect them. You know, to make sure that because the MA, every time an MA person hit, or BGF, Aryan Brotherhood, whatever, anytime they hit the jail, David and I had all and Roger Demshock. Anytime prison gang member hit the pit, and they were like, back then I think there was only 3 jails: Central Jail, El Cajon, and then North County up by Oceanside. But we told them, if anybody comes into your jail, call me and I'll come right over and I'll interview them right away. And we told them I didn't care if it was 2 a.m. or 2 p.m, you know, or 5 o'clock in rush hour traffic. They'd call me, I would go. I opened my mouth and it paid off. But
Hey, Carlos, you know what? Let's go back. So you grew up with me right there. I grew up in Castle Park, but I used to go down to Otay all the time. So, I mean, I was always down there. I knew all the guys. I mean, they were my best friends. But what happened is, so now the Barrio, they're fighting Otay. Like you said, it was probably one of the worst barrios back then. Literally, without a doubt. Worse than OTNC. It was a very violent Barrio against San Isidro, Del Sol, National City, Chula Vista back then. But so now you're there, but as you're growing up, you're seeing a lot of the guys that you went to school with, or they were older or younger, but there was always 1 or 2 that always stood out. Talk about Mauro Gonzales. Who was Mauro Gonzales? And tell us about the experiences in Mexico with him, what you knew about him, and how violent was he?
Mauro Gonzalez was the whole Gonzalez family was a very unique family. They were, the father was a heroin addict. 2 or 3 of the brothers were heroin addicts, and they each shoot up dope with their father, you know, and it was an accepted way of life back then. But Mauro had a brother by the name of Polo. He was the first one to get killed in National City doing a robbery at a liquor store. In fact, I think the guy that killed him was a retired National City PD guy. And then after that, Mauro and Mario went to prison. And when Mauro came out, he was a mean SOB before he left. But when he came back, that guy, everybody feared him because he didn't care if you were a child, a woman, an old man, and he would pistol whip you if he thought you had dope, and you didn't give it up. I mean, he'd do whatever he needed to do to get your dope. And what happened was that that activity, because he was pretty hooked. That activity took him into ripping off Emmett connects.
Carlos, before we get to the Emmett, tell us about your experience visiting him, not visiting him, but taking his wife to visit him in Tijuana when you were take your mom to go visit your tío. That's very interesting. When he was doing time in La Mesa. Back then, La Mesa was, I mean, it was the worst of the worst in the third world country in Tijuana, La Mesa State Prison. Tell us about those. And you were a cop when you were doing this. Tell us about that.
I was.
Yeah.
I had an uncle in Mexico. They will lock you up for up to a year without pressing any charges. All somebody has to say is, this guy, he defrauded me out of so much money. They pick you up, put you in the prison until you were charged or released. Well, my uncle was there, so I would take my mom and Barbara Gonzalez, Ronnie and Hector's sister, was married to Mauro, and she would hook up with us, and then we would go in my car over to the prison, and I would visit with my uncle, and Mauro would come over, because there's like little huts, you'd sit on these little shade things, and we would sit there and we would talk, and we'd get little buy drinks from the little vendors that would come around, and it was in the yard, and we would did that every weekend for about a year.
He knew you were a cop. But was it during the time that you were working BARF undercover at the border when you went down there, or were you working patrol or gangs at the time?
You know what? I think I was working gangs at the time.
Okay.
I think it was just before I went to intelligence, but no, I had to be working gangs.
So, dude, you're in Tijuana at La Mesa.
Inside the La Mesa prison,
and we're like that is crazy. You're a cop. You had just worked the hills, got involved in a bunch of shootings. You had just worked the hills, and then now you're in La Mesa with your mom because you're taking her to visit your tío, and Mauro's there. And Mauro, he was still fixing there. But he comes up to you. He knew you were a cop. He gave you that respect because you took his wife. I mean, can you imagine that, Doug? Could you imagine that, Bobby?
And he would tell me, he'd say, hey,
that's crazy.
That's old, but that's old time neighborhood stuff right there.
That's right. That's
old neighborhood stuff.
That's right. That's old time respect.
Yeah.
That's old school respect. And that's how it was back then. We had the respect. You either had the respect or you didn't have the respect. And you got what you gave. So and everybody knew their place. We never disrespected each other. We never insulted each other. Everybody. We would meet. Órale. We shake hands and ¿Cómo estás? And we would talk and we would eat together. We'd sit and eat together and visit until. Somebody got tired and said, I think I got to go now. So Barbara, my mom, and myself, we would come back home. And,
Carlos, he had little twins. Did she take the twins with him to visit him, or would she leave them? Were they born yet?
No, they had twins. Two little boys, I think.
Yes.
And Mauro loved his wife, Barbara, and he loved his family. And you did not mess with that man's family. He'd kill you in a heartbeat if he did. Without Barbara finding out, he would kill you.
Yeah.
But
well, Carlos, now he gets out of the Tijuana jail. Well, the state jail in La Mesa, real famous jail, Bobby, called La Mesa. He gets out, and Mauro, Bobby, you were gangs. Doug, you were gangs. You remember you would always hear about that 1%. That 1% that you have your gangsters, you have your wannabes, you have your hardcore, but you got that 1%, and that was the killer. This Mauro was that 1%er. He was the guy that was not only a killer, but he was also a bully and a heroin addict. Now you put all that together in that 1%. Now I'm going to talk about, before we talk about his murder and Carlos talks about the Mexican Mafia, I'm going to talk about a murder that he committed right there in the barrio in front of everybody, God and everybody. This guy right here, Eddie Cruz, was born May 12th, 1943. He was the informal leader of the barrio. Everybody respected this man. Everybody basically followed him. He was a good dude. He was that guy that, when a cop would go by, he'd always give him respect. He always gave everybody respect. Everybody loved him, a good dude. He was a gangster, but at the same time, he was a guy buying groceries for the mothers, taking care of the mothers in the barrio. So just picture this guy doing that. One day, the young homeboys come up and they tell him they're in the barrio a couple of days before he was murdered. They come up and they go, hey, Mauro is starting to tax us. He's starting to tax the connections. He's starting to tax us for being part of Otay. Can somebody talk to him? This guy, Eddie Cruz, also knew martial arts, goes up to Mauro, and he basically says, hey, ¿sabes qué? Stay away from the kids. You know what? You don't have to tax the little youngsters for being homeboys. Mauro tells him to go pound sand. They get into a fight. Eddie breaks his arm and beats the crap out of Mauro. Mauro couldn't let it go. 2 days later, on June 3rd, 1977, this guy, Eddie, like I said, very well respected in the neighborhood. He was that guy that guys would go to. Mauro shows up, drives up to the neighborhood. As he drives up, he sees all the guys in the park. He honks and he calls Eddie over. Eddie, being the macho that he was, walks over to him. They have a conversation. Eddie turns around, starts walking back to the homeboys that are kicking back by the bathroom. Mauro shoots him several times in the back. Shoots him in the back. He has a broken arm. He didn't fight him. Shoots him in the back. Before Eddie went down, he takes out his gun. Mauro gets in his car. He takes off northbound up the hill. He fires off a couple of rounds. Because of that, Eddie dies on his way to the hospital. This guy dies, huge funeral in the barrio. Everybody loved Eddie Cruz. After he dies, Mauro gets arrested because, we know that everybody talks. He gets arrested. They send him 4 years for, I believe, manslaughter. He only did 2 years. And when he got out, that's where Carlos takes over. But that's the kind of guy Mauro was. He didn't care. You beat him up. He wasn't going to leave it alone. He goes back and he murders you. And Carlos, take it over from there. What happened?
Mauro bought a house or was renting a house in National City. And he and his wife and children were living there. And he was still prendido. He would go to Chicano Park and he would rip everybody off. But he wouldn't leave. He'd stay there at Chicano Park and rip anybody off that he could. And he'd be there all day long. He wasn't afraid of anybody. And everybody was afraid of Mauro because they knew he was a stone cold killer. And in fact, I don't know of anyone that ever challenged or heard of anyone that ever challenged Mauro in any way. In fact, before they killed Mauro, Mario and Mauro were sitting on Mauro's porch in his house in National City, and Ronnie, Hector, and a third guy that we thought was a puppet from Emmett in LA. They came out, they were walking towards the porch, and by that time, Mario says that Mauro had already gone into the house and came back, and he had a gun in his waistband, and he was displaying it, and it offended Ronnie. And Ronnie says, "Oh, you're going to treat me that way?" And Mauro was very confrontational, and he goes, "What do you want?" And he has his hand on his gun, and he goes, "Let me see your gun, homie." And he went over to take the gun, and Mauro moved back and said, "You ain't taking my gun." And not only that, you're not welcome here, so you can leave. And,
wow.
And also, so you're like that, huh? And I said, "Okay, well, we'll whatever, we'll be back." And they left. And that was quite a while before they must have patched it up or pretend to have patched it up with Mauro. You know how the game was played back then. They let you think that you're back in the car when what they're trying to do is set you up to lower your guard so they can kill you.
Yeah.
And Mauro and his wife Barbara were going to celebrate their anniversary, and Mauro had actually made a reservation. And now I'm getting this information from Barbara. Barbara calls me up one day, and she's worried because Mauro hasn't come home yet, and they were supposed to go to their celebration dinner the night before, and Mauro never came. And I go, well, when was the last time you heard him? I'll check and see if he's in jail or whatever. And she goes, well, he was with my brothers. They were at the Elbow Rest in National City, and I think the Elbow Rest bar is owned by Ronnie and Hector's. I'm not sure. I think it's an uncle. It's owned by the uncle, so I used to go there and drink, and that's the last anybody heard of him, because he called him up. He says, "You know what? I'm here." He kept calling Barbara up and giving her updates because he didn't want her to worry. He was going to take her to dinner, and the last call that he got was, "I'm almost done here. We're going to take off in a minute." And then,
hey, Carlos, so the night of the murder, Carlos, the night of the murder, Barbara's calling you saying, "Hey, I don't know where Mauro's at. I'm waiting for his anniversary." Or the day after. Oh, she calls you and tells you the story.
The next day. See, Barbara trusted me and she liked me too, and Mauro's, I got along really well with Mauro's family. The mother, they'd been divorced. She had divorced her husband, and they had a house over there on 18th Street in National City. And I used to go over there and visit her. We'd have coffee and all that. Mario was there too, and Mario would sit there, and we'd chit chat. It was old school friendship and respect.
And during that time, you're working intelligence. During that time, you're working intelligence. You're working Mexican Mafia. So you were in the mix. You knew the family. So now she's telling you, and the day after. So tell us what happened. How did he die? Who killed him? What happened?
Well, I went when his body was found, and he was identified along with another guy, Tony Ferruggia, that they called. Now, I was able to piece a lot of activity together, their events together, based on a lot of people that I talked to, sources, and sources would say, "Oh yes, I was good. This is how it went down, blah blah blah." But they were, to me, they were just guessing. But I would take anybody's and everybody's information that was willing to talk to me, and from what I was able to piece together, Mauro had been at Chicano Park, and this is from Barbara. Mauro had been at Chicano Park all day, like he always did every day. Went over there, burned all the Mexican Mafia connects, would rip off all of the M dope, and the M got tired of it. So what they did is they used Tony Ferruggia. They used Tony Ferruggia to They used Tony Ferruggia to lure him. They gave Tony Ferruggia a bunch of money and they gave him a bunch of dope. Well, this guy had such a tolerance because he used so much dope. He used up all the heroin that Ronnie and Hector gave him. And then I said, well, if you run out of dope, take all this money, go buy him all the booze that he wants, get him drunk. Because they wanted him. Everybody was afraid of him. They would never take him on one-on-one because doped up or not, drunk or not, he was not afraid to engage. So Tony Ferruggia took the cash after they ran out of dope. He took the cash over to, what was that grocery store right there, the liquor store?
La Central, yeah, right there in Logan. Yeah.
Anyhow, he went, spent all his money on dope. He drank all the booze, and he still was not. He was still not to the point where people wouldn't mind taking him on. They're afraid of him. That's how bad this guy was. So Ferruggia winds up calling Ronnie and says, "Hey, he's used all the heroin. I spent all the money on booze, and it's my understanding that they told Tony Ferruggia, we'll be over there, and then we'll pick him up." So they went over there and pretended, "Oh, yeah, celebration tonight. You're gonna take my sister out to dinner." And they took him, last drink, little celebration over, let's go to the elbow rest in National City. So they went over to the elbow rest, and that's where Barbara gets calls from him and says, I'll be home soon, and he never showed up. So the last people that anybody was able to put him with was Ronnie and Hector, and probably this guy Puppet también also.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was found the next day. Apparently he had been tortured to death, and wherever they killed him, his face, at one point, his face was laying on a tile floor, and they shot him through the side of the face, and the round hit the tile floor and fragmented it, and pieces of the fragmented tile, it was that old hard tile, bounced back and embedded in Mauro's face. And then at some point, they wound up killing him. But they killed, before they did Mauro, it's my understanding that they killed Ferruggia, because Ferruggia was a liability, and they didn't want any witnesses there. So they it's my understanding they shot him in the face with a shotgun, and then they went to work on Mauro.
Hey, Carlos, you had mentioned that they tortured him. They used an ice pick and different parts of his body. I guess the coroner's office. Can you talk a little bit about that? What your sources told you at the time?
It was my understanding that they were using an ice pick.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're going to go the path that we're going, I'm not sure that we should talk about the actual details.
Okay, yeah, we won't get into the details, but they tortured him. They murdered him.
They did. They tortured him. They murdered him, and then apparently he was bleeding heavily from the head or the face or whatever, and somebody there emptied out a trash can, a trash bag,
Mm-hmm.
and they put it over just dumped it out on the floor, and they put it over his torso. Well, they didn't know. They forgot to check inside the trash bag, because you know how you throw stuff away, gooey stuff that just sticks to the bags and to the cans and all that if you don't clean them? Well, what happened was a dry cleaning bill was stuck to the inside of the trash bag that they put over his head. And it was in the name of Ronnie Ayala. Not only was it in the name of Ronnie Ayala, it was dated for that day.
Oh, wow.
So I mean, everything was recent. It was fresh. And then I'm talking to another source in county jail, and I can't remember who it was, but the Mauro Gonzales homicide came up, and he goes, I know who did it. I go, you do? Well, and I used to smuggle in burritos and stuff and cigarettes into jail, and it's amazing what they'll give up for a cigarette if they're hooked on nicotine or carne asada burrito. Instead of having to eat the bologna sandwiches that they make in county jail, I used to smuggle this all the time. Of course, the sheriffs knew that I did, but I would make I would form a conspiracy with whomever I was talking to against the sheriffs. I'd make them turn their back to the window. Do you remember the old style, the old interview rooms, Doug?
Yeah.
Where they could see all horrible. Exactly. Well, put your back to those windows, and I'll let you know. If the sheriffs are coming, just put it down and slide it over to me, and I'll tell them it's mine. So, orale. So there was like that conspiracy. We conspired against the man.
So Carlos, so now you're there. Is that where
I
Puppet's name came up?
You know what? I don't remember where Puppet's name came up, but I knew it, and it was Puppet MF from LA. But I don't remember where I interviewed. Dude, I used to interview hundreds of guys and women out on the streets, and this one guy goes, I know who killed him. I go, how do you know who killed him? And he goes, the night that he was killed, I'm going southbound on 805. We're approaching East Street, and I look, and there's a little pickup truck. I look down, and Ronnie and Hector are in the truck. And in the back, there's this trash bag that's just flapping real hard in the wind. And he goes, and I know they were found in the black trash bag. I go, okay. So and sure enough, they were found in the black trash bag. And the one that was over Mauro's head was the one that had Ronnie's laundry ticket inside the bag.
Wow. So Carlos, when the sheriffs investigated and removed the bag, Ronnie's laundry ticket was in that bag? When the sheriffs
in the bag.
In the bag. Wow. Well, we're going to get into that. Why they didn't charge.
A couple of days after, shortly thereafter, I went over to the sheriffs to let them know what I knew, and how I was able to put speculatively a lot of things together that put Ronnie and Hector with Mauro. That's when they told me that that's where I got it. They told me about being shot in the face, the fragments busting out of that hard old tile, shooting back into his face. And I'm thinking, oh man, that's awesome. You got the thing, you got this, you got the conversation and all. Are you going to go get a warrant right now? Oh yeah, we're going to get a search warrant for Ronnie's house. You know what? And I don't even remember if Ronnie and Hector were on parole. They wouldn't have needed a search warrant.
They were
either way, they didn't do anything. A month later, I go back, and they still had not gotten the search warrant. But by that time, Ronnie and Hector had pulled up all the tile, and they sanitized that. It was a little duplex in the alley, in some alley in National City, but they had sanitized everything, I was so mad because the tile that was in his face, they could have put it to the floor in Ronnie's kitchen. The receipt, everything, and I was livid, and because they took too long, and then
all the evidence was there. But the sheriffs did not file charges on these guys for the murder.
If they'd have moved on it right away, if they'd have moved on it right away, they would have easily taken them into custody. At least Ronnie. I don't know about Hector, but Ronnie for sure.
Well, let me tell you, Carlos. You mentioned a puppet. Well, I did my own little research during these past 3 weeks that we've been talking about the murder. And David Puppet Baez from Florencia was the other killer. There was 3 of them. He was the other killer after they killed Mauro. And then they have that's his gravesite there in I believe in National City. But what I did, Carlos, after we talked about 2 weeks ago about this coming episode, I called former SSU Special Agent Devin Hawks. And we talked for about 2 hours on the phone. And I told him, I go, Devin, run Mauro Gonzalez, because he still has access to his old records, and I go see what comes up, and he found Devin. Thank you, Devin. I know you're watching the show, brother. Thank you very much. A legend with California Department of Correction, Devin Hawks, SSU agent, retired. He found Carlos an old debriefing of a former Mexican Mafia member in San Quentin. I'm not going to mention his name because I believe he's still alive. And I believe he might be in the Federal Witness Protection Program, but where he was in a cell a year after Mauro was killed on June 19th, 1981, the dude Puppet got arrested, and this is him right here. He got arrested, went on a parole violation while he was in a cell with this former M member, because Puppet is from M, he's from Florencia. Told them, hey, when I was in San Diego, me, Ronnie, and Hector, we killed their brother-in-law. We murdered him. And the witness that was with them, he goes, we ended up shooting him too, killing both guys. And he's telling this guy back in 1982, a year after they murdered Mauro. And then in 1984, when this M member basically debriefed, he talked about that murder in National City. So let's go 10 years later, on May 25th, 1993, David Puppet Paez got into a bad standing with the Mexican Mafia. Black M member Black Dan Varela is a suspect on the case. They ended up giving him a hot shot there in the Barrio. So Puppet is dead now. But there is a debriefing that Devin has access to that talks about that murder exactly the way you describe it, Carlos. Exactly the way you describe it.
And
That is very interesting.
I don't know if our intelligence unit at the PD kept it, because I documented everything. I mean, I wrote reports on all my interviews. I mean, I documented everything, even if it couldn't be proven, I documented it all. If I interviewed them, I documented it. And they may have stuff there too. They may not. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you, Carlos, as we're going along with this, so now he's dead. You have all this evidence, or you go to the sheriffs. They never filed the charge. Well, during this time, I went to Mauro's funeral. I'm there at Mauro's funeral, and guess who's sitting in the middle aisle? It wasn't the funeral, it was his viewing. All the guys from Otay were there. I'm standing there with a very good friend, Oscar Martinez and Daniel Laro, former gang members, they themselves. And I'm watching, and in the casket is up front. In the middle aisle is Ronnie and Hector at the funeral. Ronnie has this beach blonde, sitting next to him. And dude, they had just murdered him a week before. They're at the funeral. They're there and they're laughing. He's hugging her. All the guys from Otay, Danny Veloria, all the guys are coming up to Danny Aro, because I mean, we knew these guys. Sure. They're coming up to Danny Aro and they're saying, hey man, that motherfucker, they were the ones that killed him. And Danny goes, what are you going to do about it? Nothing, man. They're emme. We can't touch them. But the balls of these guys, Carlos.
Oh, yeah.
These guys, they're there. They had just murdered him. They had just tortured this dude. And they're there at the funeral laughing. Literally, they're just there because, I mean, after the priest talked, everybody was coming up, and I'm looking at them, and I'm thinking, everybody from the barrio knows, but everybody's afraid of them because of the emme. And back then, Bobby, the emme, people didn't mention the word. They started mentioning the word after the movie American Me. But before nobody mentioned. So these dudes, they were protected even from the guys from the neighborhood who grew up with this guy. And they all knew that they tortured him, how they murdered him, how they found him. But nobody would touch him.
You know, where did they find the body?
In Bonita.
That's why the sheriff's had it.
Yeah, east in the unincorporated section of Chula Vista. Okay. What is now the 125 down there? There's a lake, a man-made lake down there.
So just for those that don't know, the only reason I threw it out there was that's why the sheriffs have the case. It's not where the crime occurs; it's where the body was found.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's very interesting. So great question, Joe, because we're going there now. Thank you for your years of service. You're a true legend, Mr. Chacon, an inspiration. How high in the Mexican Mafia is Ronnie Ayala standing right now? And that's where we're going to come in right now, where we're at with them. These guys were never charged. Carlos Chacon also was the case agent on a triple homicide that they were both involved in. A year and a half later, after they killed Mauro, they were involved in a triple homicide. Carlos, we're going to have you back hopefully soon where you could talk about that triple homicide. But right now, I don't want to get into it. So Ronnie and Hector, behind Carlos's investigation, got the death penalty. They go to San Quentin, and they're in San Quentin for close to 30 years. Well, now because of Governor Newsom has basically got rid of the death penalty, these guys, San Quentin death row doesn't exist anymore. So right now, Ronnie Ayala is in Centinela State Prison, which they call the White House. Hector is in Salinas Valley. And this is what they look like right now. Ronnie is 74, and I believe Hector is 73 years old, I believe. So don't quote me on it, but I believe so. So right now, Ronnie is having a war at Centinela. That's why they killed an East LA gang member over the weekend. Last weekend, they stabbed two guys. They shot up the prison with a 308. We believe it's a drone. Dude, things that are happening in Centinela right now have never happened before because Ronnie is trying to take over the yard. He's trying to take over bringing all the San Diego against LA, Inland Empire, and so forth. So that's what's right now, Joe, is happening with Ronnie Ayala. Hector is doing the same thing in Salinas Valley. Same thing in Salinas Valley. So hopefully we answered your question. So they're no longer in death row. They're walking the main line right now, and they're trying to control different prisons. They're trying to be the new Joe Morgan, the new godfather of the Mexican Mafia. But here's a murder, Carlos, that was never solved. With that said, Doug, it's all yours.
So, large departments have cold case teams usually for homicides and other types of cases. So, what I would like to do is implore the sheriff's department's cold case homicide team to take another look at this case. Technology's changed a lot since that time. We now have DNA. We know that the Ayala brothers, their DNA is going to be on file from the other cases, and the fact that they're in custody. I don't know when the last time the case was looked at, but from talking to Carlos tonight and then from previous conversations with David, I think that it's worth looking at. With that said, I'd like to have maybe an AUSA take a look at the case, because obviously if they are prosecuted again in state court, what's the point? What's going to happen with them?
Right.
So if they could look at maybe federal charges, I mean, there's all kinds of things. Is the homicide a federal case? Probably not. But you have civil rights violations. You have many tools at the federal level that could be looked at, and get these guys put away in a federal penitentiary like the Florence Federal Penitentiary AdMax, for the simple reason that these two guys are still running so much of street gang life and prison life within the state of California. They might as well be out. We talked about them a few weeks ago on another show about the cell phone accesses they have. Well, that was on death row. Now they're in a general population. I mean, they have more access to stuff than they ever did before. So It's just going to get worse out there. So that's what I would like to do is, maybe have the sheriff's department take a look at it again and get an ASUA on board, and maybe even a couple FBI agents that can help out from like the Violence Crimes Task Force or something, and really take a look at this case.
Excellent idea. Bobby, give us your feedback on the cold case, and also sending these guys on a RICO act and sending them that's where Bat Marquez is, Güero Sherm is over there, Chapo Guzman, the terrorists. That's where these two idiots need to be, because they're running, they're still killing people. The show we just had, Doug, where you basically ran the show about they're running death row or what was it, Murder Incorporated,
right,
by cell phones. These guys are still doing that. Give us your feedback, Bobby. What do you think?
One of my things is that I don't know why the case was not aggressively investigated by San Diego Sheriff's Department. Yeah. Who knows? But it just shows the importance. They had a golden opportunity to go after these guys back then, and they did nothing. They got away, and that's why, I have no idea. But you and I you too, Doug, we've seen guys that go, oh, one gangster killing another gangster, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
We should give a shit, because no one should have the right to kill anyone. And they also have family members. They got family members they're going to need, even if you're a criminal. Come on, the family on both sides deserve to have some justice. Lock them up, give them some closure, and do it.
And the other thing too is that you're sending a message to the community that we still care about the entire community, because some of these guys are well liked. It's one of those things where, we're still going forward. We're still looking at it. A case is, in my opinion, is never too old, especially ones like this that don't have any statute of limitations. Why aren't we exploring other avenues? I mean, they do it for organized crime guys all the time. You can't. Capone's the biggest one, right? They couldn't get him on the racketeering, so they got him on tax fraud. Look at other options. There's other ways to prosecute these guys, and let the families know that we actually care about them.
You know what we need to do? All three of us need to get sworn in again and go after these guys. I guarantee you they'll end up in ADX. Go ahead, Bobby, spend time.
At the tail end of my career, I was helping out with a group that was doing just homicides involving illegals. that were tied to the narco and human smuggling trade. And a lot of people were like, who gives a shit? No, come on. These suspects, if they're getting stopped by a rookie cop in the middle of the night and they must just killed somebody, have somebody in the trunk of the car, they would not hesitate to shoot some rookie cop working graveyard shift. You know, you have to investigate these aggressively. No matter who your victim is, you need to look at it, because these guys will not, this is their jale. They work to kill. That's all they do. So it's not like they're going to wake up one day and get a classified section and look for a job. Their jale is killing people. So you have to, so that was, I'm hearing this right now. They had all the evidence and they just let it slide away. And here we are. They're trying to run, they're trying to take over. And that's a danger, not only to the community, but to the corrections officers and to the officers out on the street.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Carlos, closing. Anything else, Carlos, that you want to talk before we close this segment? I'll tell you, mil gracias, Carlos. I know it took a lot for you to come over and talk about this, but justice needs to prevail here. Hopefully the DA's office, the sheriff's office, AUSA, I agree with you, Doug, is going to relook at this case. There's evidence still there. And like you said, Doug, back then they didn't have DNA. Now we do.
Right.
And you know what? If they could build a case on these guys, if they would have built a case back then, Carlos, we never would have had the triple homicide that you prosecuted them on. Those guys still would have dead. They were all dope dealers, but still, we wouldn't have had that. And many other homicides. He's been involved, Ronnie, in several homicides in death row. With that said, Carlos, anything else?
You know, these guys run the streets, thinking that they command the respect of the community, the other gang members, but they don't. It's not respect that they command. Everybody's just afraid of them, and it takes guys like us, law enforcement, to go after them. We at least have a fighting chance against these animals, and I felt that I was close to Mauro's mom and the family. Yeah. And only because we grew up together, and I felt close to Barbara, Mauro's wife, the sister of Ronnie and Hector Ayala, and I felt bad for her, and there's things that you want to tell them, but you really can't, and you run the risk of them not wanting to be around you anymore or talk to you, because they consider you an enemy, because Ronnie and Hector were family. You never know where you could go to be trusted after situations like that. But we're there. We shouldn't be set back at all. I know that everybody here, I'm sure, has the intestinal fortitude to do what needs to be done. And that's the only thing. That's my only regret. Is that we couldn't do what we needed to do back at the time, regardless of who we were going to hurt.
Hey, Carlos, thank you very much for all your years of service. Thank you for mentoring me. Thank you for bringing me in the department. And one day we'll talk about my first beer with you, which was very interesting. I don't want to talk about it now, but we'll talk about my first beer with you. Hey, brother, we love you, man. Thank you very much for being on the show. Don't right now, as soon as we stop, I'm going to go and put you in the back. Don't leave, because I want to set some dates. We want you definitely to come back. With that said, Bobby, any last words for Carlos?
No, it was an honor to meet you finally, even though it's to a video conference. But your exploits, and there's a lot of cops. There's a lot of great cops out there that did a lot of great work in the generation even before I came, and forever thankful for them. And I hope that we were able to pass the torch to the next generation to keep putting bad people in jail and make the community safe. So thank you.
We tried.
Yep, we tried.
Big Doug, last words for Carlos. And he passed the torch to you. You picked up where he left off. You're a legend, without a doubt, with San Diego PD.
I'm going to share a quick personal story about Carlos.
Yeah.
So first of all, we were both, I got to work with Carlos finally. I mean, I worked around him several times, but finally we were both detective sergeants in the gang unit for a short time. And we had a good time together, I think. I mean, and he taught me a lot of different things up there. And I think they helped me with my squad. So I thank you for that, Carlos. Secondly, is when I was a very young patrol officer. Carlos was in the intelligence unit. I don't know if he remembers this, but he gave me a call, because I had an uncle, and I won't say what he was involved in, but he was involved in an organized crime group, been to prison many, many times. But he always listed me as his emergency contact on his arrest reports. So Carlos calls me, and I actually went upstairs to talk to him about my uncle. Why was my uncle using me as his emergency contact? And Carlos was very understanding about the situation. And he helped me locate my uncle in La Mesa prison when he got arrested down in Mexico. So
I don't remember that.
Yeah, so that so I could get my grandmother down there to visit him while he was in custody down there. So
I didn't take your grandmother, did I?
Pardon me?
Did I take your grandmother there too?
No, you told me who to contact down there so that I could make sure that my grandmother was taken care of.
Oh, okay.
So she went down to visit him many times, and then he finally got out. But those are my personal stories with Carlos. So the underlying part is he took care of people he didn't even know he was taking care of.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you.
And Carlos, I'm sure there's a lot of people, man, that you helped. Even the Gonzalez family, the mom, Mario, he also died. I mean, rest in peace. That you helped, that you will never know. But when you get to heaven, you're going to find out. They're going to come up to you. You helped me here. You helped me there. You're a hero, brother. Thank you very much. Don't leave. I'm just going to go ahead and just put you in the back. All right, so we could continue talking. Mil gracias, Carlos. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Guys, I'm hoping, man, that Roger Dempsey is going to forward this episode to the sheriff's cold case team. They take a look at it. Somebody that's watching the show could share it with an AUSA, and they could pick it up. What did you guys think? What do you think, Bobby?
Yeah, it's something they should at least try to look at. The cold case work that these groups are doing now, they're solving cases that everybody thought were long forgotten. So, hoping somebody will be willing to give it a look and run with it. And there's some resources out there to do it. I'm sure they could find investigators that would be willing to pick it up. It's just finding someone to be willing to prosecute it.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Doug, tell us about next week. We have Leslie Albright. Tell us about her and tell us a little bit about what we're talking about.
Yeah, Leslie Albright.
Right.
She was a retired detective for San Diego PD. She worked sex crimes. In fact, she was in the sex crimes unit when my wife was there. But she worked sex crimes, elder abuse, different things. And she's now retired. But she's still working on cold cases with other agencies throughout the Midwest. So she's got a really interesting story. But there was a case in San Diego involving this officer, Anthony Arebelos, and he was involved in sexual assaults while on duty. And it was a big case in San Diego County. I mean, it was on the news. I don't know if it was nationwide or not, but it was definitely Southern California. But she was the lone investigator attached to that case. And, they had to keep it under wraps. It was an internal investigation initially with internal affairs, and she got selected out of sex crimes to do that case. And, it brought a lot of heartache to the department. And so she's got a really good story behind this and how this case broke and how it actually opened up another case involving a sexual assault involving an officer on duty. So, you never know what rabbit hole these cases are going to take you down sometimes. And unfortunately in that unit, you work on your own. You don't have the support. And because it was an internal affairs case, she was really kind of left to her own devices to work this case. So it's going to be a good episode.
Oh, yeah, next Wednesday. And also, guys, next Tuesday, we have on the Gray Line at 5 o'clock, the 30th, we're going to talk about and we're going to have Officer Jonathan de Guzman, JD. He was the first officer ever killed in the GST, Gang Suppression Team officer, killed in the line of duty. And it's going to be a great episode. His partner is going to be on our show, and he's going to break down exactly what happened. An individual got arrested. He was sent to death row, but now he's walking a normal open yard. But next Tuesday on the Gray Line. With that said, guys, go ahead, Bobby, any last words?
No, I didn't get you to do a shout out. I think my
go ahead, brother. Do a shout.
My son-in-law's was watching from Germany. I want to throw a shout out to him. He just found out yesterday he was promoted to colonel. He's in the Air Force.
Wow.
So he's a full bird colonel. He's an F-35 fighter
Congratulations,
pilot.
man. That's
So
awesome.
we're very happy for him, very proud of him.
How old is he? How old is he, Bobby?
He's about 42, 41, 42.
Wow, he's young to be a colonel, huh?
Yeah, well, I think in the Air Force, if you're a fighter pilot, you can move up the ranks pretty quick or faster. So, and he got a great job. He had to do a sucky admin job. He's an XO for a 3-star general over in Germany. So it's going to be another 4 years for him, my daughter, and my 2 grandsons over. I think they're going to finish a year in Germany and then come back stateside. But we're very proud of them. Great news for us.
Beautiful. Congratulations. Ceci says congratulations, and everybody else that's coming on. Great show. With that said, Bobby, any last words?
That's it. I'm just one last thing. Leo Silva, DEA's a group supervisor that I worked with in Monterrey. His book is about ready to come out, and when it does, I'll be bringing him on. He was spent 5 years in Mexico, Guadalajara, Monterrey, and was part of the group that took down a lot of the Cartel del Golfo, Los Zetas, and CDN. So I just talked to him 2 days ago.
Well, you know what, Bobby? I was going to tell you right now when we talked to Chacon, we have August the 21st. We're booked all the way to August 21st. Write it down. See if he could be on the show that day, whether the book's done or not. I've heard a lot about this guy. He's a legend with DEA. Man, we would love to have him on our show, talk about the real Mexican cartels because he was there with them. So August 21st, if you could get a hold of him, that'd be great, brother.
Yeah, he was a guy down at Ground Zero with a lot of the violence that's going on. Leo Silva, retired. He lives down in the valley right now in Texas.
Perfect. August 21st. Big Doug, last words, anything?
No words of wisdom, but Bobby had mentioned earlier about Kiki Camarena, the DEA agent that was kidnapped and killed down in Mexico. So many, many years ago, there was a really good book written called Desperados about that investigation.
I read it.
And I don't recall if the author's first name or last name, but it was Shannon, whether it was first or last.
Elaine Shannon.
Pardon me?
Elaine Shannon. We're connected on LinkedIn.
So you can find her book still, but if you're interested in our federal agents that are working down in Mexico and how that works and what can happen to them, that's a great book to read. It gives a lot of insight, and I believe his son ended up being a deputy district attorney in San Diego, if I'm not mistaken.
No, he's a judge now.
Oh, he's a judge now. Okay,
he's a judge. His son is a judge. Kiki Jr. is a judge.
Okay, so anyways, it's a great book to read, and I'll leave it at that.
Guys, with that said, one last word to the Eddie Cruz's family. You know, Eddie was a good man, an honorable man. I mean, he was a vato from the Barrio, but he would take care of the Barrio. And he has a son. His name is Eddie Jr., and I know Eddie. And Eddie is an honorable man. Eddie worked for the city of San Diego, I believe, 32 to 34 years. He was not a police officer, but he worked for the city. He's a man of honor. So through his father, through his death, his son, his grandson, his grandchildren have become good, productive citizens. So by the grace of God, may you rest in peace, brother, and we'll see you in heaven when it's time for us to go. With that said, guys, we will see you next week. It's going to be a great episode with Leslie Albright. And with that said, I'm going to quote you, Bobby. I'm going to quote you. Trust the process and trust the author. Our author is Jesus Christ. Trust him. Trust the process. It's all going to work out. With that said, we'll see you next week. This is our promo video for JD GST de Guzman's murder on next Tuesday at 5 o'clock on the Gray Line.